Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, All Hands on Deck, Local Strategies for Reaching All Families Eligible for the Child Tax Credit, also known as the CTC. I'm Roxy Keynes, and on behalf of the Get It Back campaign, I'd like to welcome you to today's session. We're really excited to have you here to join us with several dynamic speakers. Our intention for today is that you will leave with strategies, resources, and ideas to conduct local child tax credit outreach in your community. Before we get started, we will share just a little bit of who we are and what you can expect for today. If you aren't familiar, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and policy institute. We pursue federal and state policies to reduce poverty and inequity in equitable and effective ways. For over 30 years, the center has run a project currently known as the Get It Back campaign. And we're a national effort to help connect eligible people to tax benefits. So in addition to the child tax credit, we help connect people to the earned income tax credit and other refundable tax credits, as well as free tax filing assistance. We work with a network of diverse partners, and we're very happy to have you here joining us today. So for today's session, we'll start with an overview of the child tax credit expansion, just to make sure that we're all on the same page of what the child tax credit is and why it's important and the opportunity that it presents. Next, we'll hear a little bit about building the case for outreach and how you can make sure that you can have the resources to support your outreach efforts. Then we'll get to hear from 4 local communities about the CTC outreach strategies that they are using and implementing on the ground. We'll also share some resources with you so that you can get started in your communities. And then we'll end with plenty of time for questions. So before we get started, we'd like to invite you to please share a little bit about yourself. If you could put into the chat your name, organization, and where you're joining from, we would love to know who is in our virtual room. I also want to share that this session is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you within a week from today. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the child tax credit expansion. Here is a quick overview of the highlights and important pieces that we want you to keep in mind as we move through this session. Under the American Rescue Plan, almost every family can receive money from the child tax credit. This includes families that haven't filed a tax return, families without recent income, and families that have a child with a Social Security number, even if that person does not have one for themselves. So this expansion allows a lot of families to receive money to help support their families. Qualifying households will receive $3,600 for each child under 6 years old and $3,000 for each child between 6 and 17 years old. Families can receive half of the credit in monthly payments in 2021 and the other half when they file a tax return in 2022. It's important to note that this child tax credit is not a loan and it does not impact public benefits. So with this expanded child tax credit, if all families that are eligible actually get the child tax credit, it can have a tremendous impact. It can reduce child poverty by more than 40%, and even larger reductions for Black, Hispanic, and Native American children and children in deep poverty. Because of the impact that this has, the potential impact that this has, advocates are working to make this expansion permanent. Currently, it is only for 1 year for tax year 2021. So to help people get the child tax credit and to help people manage child tax credit payments, the IRS has launched 2 portals. The first portal is the Nonfiler portal, and this portal allows people to sign up for advance payments as well as claim previous stimulus checks. They'll be able to claim the first and second stimulus checks as the recovery rebate credit. And by using this portal, a person is submitting a 2020 tax return. And so with that information, they'll also be able to get the third stimulus check as well. A separate portal that is available is the Child Tax Credit Update Portal, also known as CTC Up. This portal allows you to opt out of advance payments or change or add bank account information. These are the main features that are currently available. Eventually, people will also be able to make updates to their income, marital status, and the number of children that they have. This is important because these are things that can impact one's eligibility for the child tax credit and impact the amount of the credit that they receive. And with this portal, a person does need to create an account to use it. So they must either create an account through the IRS or an account through ID.me. The Get It Back campaign has resources that you'll hear more about later that can help you navigate both of these portals. So with this expansion of the child tax credit, there's a huge opportunity to benefit many families. And the good news is that most families will receive the payments automatically. In July, nearly 60 million children and families got their payments automatically. This includes families who filed a tax return in 2019 or 2020, and families who use the non-filer portal for stimulus payments in 2020 to claim a dependent child. Unfortunately, this did not reach everyone. So the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities released a research paper last week that estimates that roughly 4 million children or more are left out of receiving automatic payments. So this estimate includes 2.3 million children who do not appear on an existing tax return, but they do have health insurance. And the Treasury Department compiled data on this population, and it is available broken down by zip code. Our estimate also includes about 1.6 million children that are expected to be born in 2021 with Medicaid coverage. We say 4 million or more because there's an unknown number of children that are uninsured and do not appear on an existing tax return. Within this population of people who don't receive the child tax credit advance payments automatically, there are additional groups that we are aware of. This includes immigrant parents whose children have Social Security numbers, but they don't have a Social Security number and may be hesitant or unable to file their taxes. This also includes recipients of Social Security, Supplemental Security Income, Veterans Affairs, pension or disability or railroad retirement benefits who did not use the non-filer portal for stimulus payments to claim their dependent child. So they got the stimulus payments automatically for themselves, but did not use the portal to get the payment for their child. So this is the population that we know of. And again, it could be more. You may see data on different numbers from other places. So just know that there's a large population, and there's a lot of work to do. And when you're thinking about this 4 million or more number, our report does include state by state numbers so that you can localize that for where you are. So when we're thinking about this 4 million, how can we dig deeper? Who are the non-filers and where do we find them? Those are questions that everyone wants to know. And while we don't have an exact profile, here's what we do know. We know that these are groups that are important to prioritize for outreach. And these are groups overall that may be people that are in the non-filer population. It may look different in your exact community, so you'll want to do some more research to look at how to really hone in on non-filers where you are. The non-filer population for child tax credit outreach includes parents and caregivers with very low incomes, including people who are self-employed, people with lower education levels, people with disabilities, people with limited internet access or smartphone only internet access. This is important to highlight because to use the non-filer portal, it is not mobile friendly and it doesn't resize on a smartphone. People who are housing insecure and people who are Black, American Indian, or Alaska Native, as well as other groups of color, and people who lack Social Security numbers, but whose children have Social Security numbers, and people who don't speak English as their first language. These are some groups that you may want to prioritize for your child tax credit outreach efforts. So there's an opportunity with this 4 million or more children that aren't receiving the child tax credit advance payments automatically. And the opportunity is that we can help people navigate challenges so that they can submit their information to the IRS. Submit their information to the IRS either by using the non-filer portal or filing a tax return. Some families may actually need to file a tax return, or they may benefit more by filing a tax return because they're eligible for other tax credits. So this is why we're here. This is why we're excited to hear about how our community is doing this. And this is what our presenters will be talking about today. So before we start to hear from our presenters, we're going to hear a little bit more about building the case for outreach. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Aditya.
Thank you so much, Roxy. I hope everyone's able to hear me okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Aditya Srivastav. I have the pleasure of working with Jenny and Roxy at the center, and I am on our family income support team. What I've been tasked to do today is to highlight the importance of this conversation that we're having. And I find that a little bit funny because as I'm looking through that chat and seeing everyone who's in our virtual room today, I think most everyone already understands why this is really important. So I'll keep this pretty brief. We know, as Roxy has said, that too many families are continuing to experience hardship from our ongoing pandemic. Again, as we know, thankfully, most of these families who received the stimulus payments or have received EITC in prior years will most likely have automatically received these current CTC payments that are going out. But the thing is, those who are most severely affected, meaning those with the lowest incomes or in some situations no income, who stand to benefit substantially from the CTC, may also more likely be in a position where they haven't filed their taxes in prior years and thus may not be receiving these benefits as readily as some of the others. Roxy pointed out the number. I'm going to reiterate it. The center has found that up to 4 million children could be in this sort of situation. So this is really why we've convened today, because outreach to this group that is targeting the children and these families and those in similar circumstances is vital in ensuring the success of the CTC. So as you're listening to our fantastic panelists today, please do it with the framing of thinking through how each of these models that they discuss might work in your own agency or city. Like, what are the pieces that you can take and apply in your own setting? What you'll hear for sure is that being innovative in your outreach efforts is absolutely key. Now, of course, before I go forward, I mean, let's acknowledge it, that we really can't do any of this without adequate funding. So I'll address that briefly. The first thing is that one thing to keep in mind is that the funds that have been made available through the American Rescue Plan have a lot of flexibility, and as a result can definitely be used to set up Navigator programs or to strengthen and add capacity to existing efforts that may already exist in your communities. We've even heard of one place that has established a subsidized jobs program as a work training program where trainees are working as navigators to help families access the CTC. So through the ARP, there's a lot of flexible funding currently available at both the state and local government level. Aside from that and outside of that, if you're not sure whether you would be able to access that, one other source to consider is getting funding for this from local foundations and nonprofits. So as an example, on the national level, we know that the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund has provided grants to 31 American cities to develop financial navigator programs who are also linking families to the CTC. Private organizations like CFE and other local ones are frequently looking for opportunities to ensure that people are able to access the full benefits for which they are eligible and entitled. An outreach effort does exactly this. It provides an optimum way for local private organizations to ensure a maximal use of public dollars. So we see it as an excellent way to contribute to making people's lives better in this very difficult time. So as you're listening through to our panelists today, I encourage you to take some notes on how you could develop similar outreach efforts in your own community. And at the same time, begin to think through how you would justify the case for such an outreach effort if you were making
It looks like Aditya might be having some technical difficulties here. Let's just give it another minute, see if she's able to join back, and if not, we can turn to the panel.
Sorry about that.
All good. Technical difficulties happen.
Perfect. I am not sure what point you guys lost me at. I guess I'll wrap up with saying that, as I was saying, there are private funds available, and you could make a very solid case for why private funding would be an excellent for why outreach efforts would be an excellent way for private funds to be used. So as you're listening through to our panelists today, take some notes on how each of those models would work in your own setting, and also think through how you would write up that justification to public or private funders for why such an effort is necessary in your community. And that's it, Jenny. Sorry about the difficulties.
No worries, Aditya. It really happens. I think we all deserve a little bit of grace for all the technical difficulties that are happening these days. And thank you so much for sharing. So in this next part, the most exciting part of today, we're gonna get to hear from For cities, we're going to hear from the city of Philadelphia, Albuquerque, and Detroit through University of Michigan, and also hear from CASA, an organization in Maryland. So very exciting stuff. So before we get that kickstarted, I just wanted to say that the folks on this who are going to be presenting about local outreach have really cool and great experiences. So please use the chat to ask any questions that you have. We want to get a lot of questions into our presenters. And so to start, we will be hearing from Beth McConnell from the city of Philadelphia. Beth McConnell is the Director of Policy for the City of Philadelphia's Office of Community Empowerment, and Opportunity, which is Philadelphia's community action agency. Beth is part of the team that includes CEO and the mayor's policy office, managing increased investment to ensure that we maximize the number of Philadelphians that claim the child tax credit. Prior to joining CEO, Beth spent 27 years in public interest and social justice advocacy in the nonprofit sector. So Christine, if you could start the slides again, and Beth, welcome. And I think we can get started. Thanks, Beth.
Great. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. So again, my name is Beth McConnell. My contact information there is on my first slide if you want to send me an email, and you can follow the work of the Office of the Community Empowerment and Opportunity on our Twitter handle there at PHLCEO. I want to start by saying that next slide, actually. So we have done some data analysis here in Philadelphia, and our estimate is that the child tax credit could lift 75,000 Philadelphians out of poverty. That's a very big deal for us. We are, as some of you know, the poorest big city in America. And pre-pandemic, our poverty rate was greater than about 23%. It had inched down slightly over the last few years, but still a unacceptably high 23%. So this is could have an enormous impact on Philadelphians. Next slide. We have a 4-part strategy that I'm going to talk through. I'm going to mention, first of all, the funding for the strategy has come from 3 primary places. One is CEO as the community action agency. We distribute our community service block grant dollars here in Philadelphia. So we've put some CSBG dollars on the table for the strategy I'm about to talk about. The mayor's policy office is obviously an enormous priority for Mayor Kenny. He and his team went to private foundations and asked them to put some money on the table as well to support this work. And we also, as part of the budget, the City of Philadelphia's budget that was approved in June, were able to add some additional resources and local general fund dollars. And that was all after the previous year, where a lot of that work had been cut dramatically because of COVID and because of decreased funding availability. So our 4-part strategy, part 1 is we are boosting the capacity of our tax prep partners. So our local nonprofit community organizations, particularly Campaign for Working Families, that provides free tax prep citywide. And we also have a coalition of Latino serving tax providers, SEBA. So we want to make sure that they had the dollars to staff up and stay open, all the way through October and then reopen again in January. Unfortunately, budgets were severely cut, and many of them just did not have the capacity to serve existing clients. So we're making sure that they have that capacity. Slide 2. Next slide. So the second thing, our second strategy, is we are crafting a communications campaign. We have actually put out an RFP to hire a marketing and communications firm to come up with the most effective branding and messaging and imagery to actually place ads in local community papers, all of course targeting the most likely non-filers that we really need to reach. What I'm going to share with you on the next few slides is not that communications campaign. It was while we were waiting to do that work, because obviously it takes some time to stand all this stuff up. We did just put together some materials just to make sure we're starting to get the word out and engaging in some free strategies. So we have fact sheets and social media shareables that are available in 9 different languages. This is just an example of one social media shareable. And I will put in the chat when I'm done a link to our Google Drive where you could see the fact sheets in all the different languages. Next slide. And this is just another example of some of the social media shareables. Next slide. And we're making sure, of course, it's all of our materials are also in Spanish. We have a large Spanish-speaking population here in Philadelphia, making sure that folks who are mixed status families know that they're eligible. One of the reasons why it was very important for us to build capacity at SEBA and their partner organizations that serve that community specifically. Next slide. And we've been engaging in some other activity. We've had street teams go out and hand out flyers in June on nice sunny days outside check cashers and grocery stores and dollar stores and other places in our lowest income neighborhoods. We have had digital bus shelters and kiosks throughout the city programmed with images telling folks about the credit. We currently we've been doing vaccine outreach for the last couple of months, and we're currently exploring partnering the vaccine outreach with the tax outreach. We call it tax and vax internally. We won't use that publicly. So as ways that we can again reach both populations, both offer them something such as assistance with claiming the child tax credit, and hopefully use that as a way to talk to them about vaccine as well. We are also working to reach out to foster care parents and providers to make sure that they're aware of the credit as well. And there's a lot more to come on those strategies. Next slide. The third strategy is that we want to make sure that our community partners have resources and also training. So we did our partners at Community Legal Services, which is our large legal service nonprofit here in Philadelphia, and Campaign for Working Families teamed up to do a Navigator training for community partners last week. That was very well attended. We recorded it and are making that available. And we'll continue doing that work. We're trying to stand up right now kind of two pieces. One is a group of folks just to do outreach, but then another group of folks that can be particularly well-trained and resourced to do portal navigation. Since, as many of you know, it's not easy. And it requires some special skill and also access to the internet and a computer, desktop or laptop. So we're working to sustain that, stand that up. And we're also making grants available to our grassroots community partners for them to propose what they would do to reach folks in their communities. They know their neighborhoods best. They know the particular communities that they serve best. So we're going to ask them, what could you do? And we're going to make some grant dollars available in the coming weeks, I hope. And I can also provide you a link to the Navigator training that we did for those who are interested in it. Next slide. And then the fourth strategy is using data for all of this, for the outreach, but then also for the evaluation of what's working. We hope and would love to work with all of you on continuing the pressure on Washington to extend this tax credit and make it permanent. So we really want to learn from this process this year, what's working, what's effective, because we'd really like to do it again next year for the 2022 tax year. So we're doing some evaluation and we're also targeting our outreach. We have from our social service agencies pulled data. We've gotten about 62 or 64,000, forgive me, children that we got from that data. They are folks who are enrolled in Medicaid, TANF related Medicaid, or they used emergency shelter services since the beginning of 2000. So this is child level data. We deduped it, so we know that there are about 42,000 phone numbers on there. So it could be a couple kids in one household. And we have about 34,000 addresses on there. So we are now working on standing up the capacity that we need to do text messages, make telephone calls, and do mailers, and to track who is getting those different interventions. We have a researcher that we'll be working with who'll be able to kind of look and see which of those methods were effective and actually getting folks to claim the credit. Was it effective to do all three, just two interventions, just one? So these are some of the things we'll be evaluating. And we also will be engaging what we call a service design studio, which is housed within the city of Philadelphia. We have a studio and a team of folks that help us improve the experience of the customer, if you will, or of the resident. So we're going to engage them in looking at the experience of someone going to our tax prep partners, going to one of our portal assistance partners. What's that process like for them, and how can we make it easier? What can we learn from their experience trying to navigate this system to be more effective in the future? We also plan on doing some focus groups particularly of people who did not file and did not claim the credit, so that we can understand why, and try to figure out what some of the more effective messages might be and effective messengers to get them to take advantage of the credit in the future. So those are our 4 main strategies, and I think that is my last slide. I just want to close by saying we're very excited to do this work. We're very excited to learn from the other partners on the call what you're doing. We are building this plane while flying it, like many of you are at the same time. And we can't tell you how grateful we've been for the leadership of our mayor and the folks in our mayor's office to get us to this point, to take full advantage of this absolutely historic and life-changing federal policy. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Beth. So I know, Beth, you have to leave a little bit early, so can't stay for the Q&A. So if anyone has any questions for Beth in particular, you can leave them in right now. We did get one question from Carla. Carla says, how do you know where non-filers are in order to focus your ads?
We do have the data from Treasury that Roxy mentioned earlier that tells us zip code by zip code, the particular neighborhoods where they believe the largest number of non-filers are. So we're going to use that data to target many of our outreach strategies, but we're not going to limit it to that. We're also going to focus on key populations. They may live any part of the city, but that are highly likely to be non-filers.
Awesome, thank you, Beth. So now we're going to turn it over to Delma Madrigal from the city of Albuquerque. Delma is the Bank On Outreach Project Manager. Delma provides leadership for the development and implementation of the Bank On Burke project and assists with community outreach for the Consumer Financial Protection Initiative. The Bank On Burke project connects individuals and families to safe and affordable checking accounts in the Albuquerque community. So Delma, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Christine, for starting the slides. And we can get started with your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities for the opportunity to share about our outreach efforts of the City of Albuquerque in connection to the Child Tax Credit. My name is Delma Madrigal. I am the Bank On Outreach Project Manager with the City of Albuquerque. Bank On Burke, I know the Burke is hard to sound, but maybe just think of the Albuquerque or Bank On Burke. Bank On Burke is a fairly new project that publicly launched in June of this year. So yes, less than 2 months ago. So we're very, very new. We started the process for this work at the end of November when I came on to the City of Albuquerque. Talk about it being interesting in starting a job during a pandemic and working as a remote employee, right? So Bank On Burke is a City of Albuquerque economic inclusion initiative for connecting individuals and families to safe and affordable checking accounts available in the Albuquerque community. Highlights of what I'll be sharing today are connecting our outreach in regard to the child tax credit with other initiatives and support from other departments of the city. I will talk briefly about the National Bank On movement, as well as our Bank On Burke project at the City of Albuquerque and how this connects to the child tax credit monthly payments. And then I will also share an invitation at the end for learning more about other outreach efforts at a collaborative Zoom event with the Internal Revenue Service this coming Friday. Next slide. So let's start with the child tax credit outreach connections made at the city so far. So the Consumer Financial Protection Initiative and Financial Navigators program are complementary financial empowerment strategies at the city. I don't know if you need to do a click if they're the Financial Navigators little box isn't showing them. No, go back. I'm not sure why that other box, there it is. There you go. Thank you. So the Consumer Financial Protection Initiative and Financial Navigators Program are complementary financial empowerment strategies at the city. The Consumer Financial Protection Initiative launched in fall of 2019, and the Financial Navigators Program launched in January of this year, so another new program. Bank On intersects with these two initiatives. The Office of Equity and Inclusion is providing communication support for sharing about the child tax credit. Next slide. So sharing about the child tax credit through our Consumer Financial Protection Initiative, or as we call it, CFPI, was a great way to connect all three initiatives, CFPI, Financial Navigators, and Bank On. CFPI provided an alert regarding scams connected to the child tax credit to over 400 contacts in our email listserv, which includes community partners, advocates, and other city departments. Financial Navigators and Bank On information was included as resources for connecting individuals and families to assistance and information for filing to receive the child tax credit, and then also for finding safe and affordable checking accounts to receive their payments quicker and safely. As you can see on the slide, we provided the alert in several languages for sharing in our community. We provided these in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. Next slide. Equity in outreach to immigrant and indigenous populations is important to our Financial Navigator program as well. If you visit their website, you will see information not only in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin, but also in Farsi, Arabic, and Dene. Service from the Financial Navigators is available in other languages via telephonic interpretation. Next slide. As I mentioned a while ago, our Office in Equity, Inclusion, Communications communications person there was able to really help us in getting information out regarding with social media efforts on Facebook and Instagram. So the images that you see up on the screen right now were shared via social media, and they're aligned with national efforts to connect those who are receiving child tax credits with access to safe and affordable checking accounts for receiving their payments safer, faster, and without fees. Our contact with the Office of Equity and Inclusion also assisted with getting a press release out from the mayor's office regarding child tax credits, and including mention of our Financial Navigators and Bank On resources. So our mayor is really behind this as well in making sure, wanting us to make sure that we are able to demonstrate to the community how all of these services come together at the city. Next slide. So I just got to share a little bit about Bank On and maybe to help with understanding the connections, right? So as I mentioned previously, Bank On is a national movement to increase access to safe and affordable bank and credit union accounts. There are over 80 Bank On coalitions across the country, and Bank On is one of the newest coalitions joining in this movement. So how do these checking accounts work? Bank On national account standards provide local programs with a benchmark for account partnerships with financial institutions and are designed with consumers in mind, especially for many of those that we're trying to reach with the CTC payments. The seal that you see on the right is provided to the financial institution upon approval of a checking account that meets the standards for being safe, affordable, and functional. So what does safe, affordable, and functional mean? Safe is no overdraft, non-sufficient funds, or dormancy fees. Many times these feel like hidden or surprise fees. I know I've experienced overdraft fees and it was not fun. And for some, many in our community, these fees can snowball and turn into a devastating experience that is hard to come back from. Affordable means that the monthly fees are $5 or less with a low minimum opening deposit. With some institutions, the $5 can even be waived. Low minimum opening deposit is typically $25 or less. Research with the FDIC in terms of what they have gathered from why folks say they don't get banking accounts, that they don't have enough money to open a bank account is one of the top reasons. So this helps with with those perceptions, right? Functional, can pay bills, make deposits and withdrawals, and transfer money. Essentially, the majority of these checking accounts are checklist checking accounts with a debit card. There are currently 114 certified accounts available across the country. And if you would like to know more about these accounts, please visit the link at the bottom of the page. If you go to that Join Bank On link there, you'll not only see the accounts, you'll see the coalitions. So you may be able to connect to a coalition that is close to you. As I mentioned a while ago, there's over 80 coalitions nationwide in terms of doing some collaborative work. So when you go to the website, you'll see the banks and credit unions that offer the accounts and also the name of the account. Super important for people to remember to ask for that specific account. Just because a financial institution has a Bank On certification, this does not apply to all their accounts, but it applies to the one account that met their standards. Next slide. So child tax credit and Bank On Porque, how does this all come together, right? So as mentioned earlier, filers can now add or change their bank or credit union account information on the IRS Child Tax Credit Update Portal. Bank On Porque currently has 8 financial institutions in Albuquerque that offer Bank On certified accounts. I also want to make sure and mention with this first bullet point that what identification is required for opening a bank or credit union account is a question that is asked a lot, especially from our community partners that work with immigrant and refugee populations. On our Bank On Porque website, which I will share at the end, we've included a chart that lists what alternative identification is accepted at the financial institution offering a Bank On certified account in Albuquerque. And yes, ITNs, which are accepted for filing for receiving CTC payments, are also accepted at some banks and credit unions. Not all, but some. So this is another one of those debunking the myths in regards to who qualifies, who can get a checking account. I think we can all agree on the last bullet point that receiving child tax credit monthly payments and other emergency benefits by direct deposit is faster, safer, and cheaper. I hope this has been helpful in understanding the connection of Bank On Porque with the child tax credit and how we have merged several things together. Next slide. So as part of our outreach efforts in regard to the child tax credit, Bank On Porque and the Internal Revenue Service are collaborating on a Zoom event for this Friday. Our intent is to offer information for those providing outreach and hands-on assistance for accessing the child tax credit. Several of the organizations attending are already providing assistance, and we hope that they will be sharing in the conversation this Friday as well. We have a couple of organizations from Albuquerque, Healthcare for the Homeless, Catholic Charities that are already providing this assistance. So we're really looking forward to hearing from them as well. So you are welcome to attend the event. The registration link is provided at the bottom of the slide. I realize it's this Friday and you may not receive everything until next week, but next slide. I am my information to contact me via email is up here on this slide, dmadrigal@cabq.gov. So at the bottom of the screen also is the Bank On Porque website address, which I mentioned I would share. I will have to mention just a couple more things that are on the website, which I think are really helpful for folks, especially that are not comfortable with the banking, with financial institutions. So our website has charts for the alternative identification information. It also has a Google My Maps with branch location. Physical access can be important, right? We're always talking about access. Language access information is also up on our website because this can be so helpful for many in our community in search of a financial institution that fits them and their needs. It was interesting to see all the different languages on some of the ATM machines. Could make a difference for someone, especially for those in our community here in Albuquerque. So thank you again for the opportunity, and that's the end of my presentation. Please feel free to reach out if you would like the link for the event on Friday. And we don't get the PowerPoints in time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delma. And so sorry for mispronouncing Bank On Porque.
No worries, it happens every time I'm presenting. How do we say that one, right? And this was, this is just some of our some of how we're doing, some of our advertising and stuff is because, as you can see in that one Albuquerque, it's got the Borque, right? So no worries.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from ACTon Branch Wilson, who will be talking about building out a citywide outreach campaign. ACTon is the Assistant Director of Community Initiatives at Poverty Solutions at the University of Michigan, where she leads policy research, data analysis, and evaluation projects in partnership with community and governmental organizations in Michigan. She is here today representing a citywide multi-sector coalition of groups promoting the child tax credit in Detroit. So welcome, ACTon, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you folks for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. So as was just said, I'm not here on behalf of U of M in particular, but really on behalf of this amazing coalition that we built of organizations that are all working together to spread the word about the child tax credit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our coalition, what activities we're taking on, how it all works, and who does what. First, a little bit of background. So this came together kind of organically. There were folks in separate fields thinking about tax prep, thinking about early education and how to support families, thinking about the child tax credit, but we weren't necessarily working together or in the same spaces until we all started asking around to figure out, who is working on this child tax credit issue. And it was clear that, one organization wasn't taking the lead. So we all kind of got together as a coalition and decided to join forces. So, one of the things that happened quite early was that the Kresge Foundation, which is one of our local foundations, they also work across the country, but they have a robust Detroit presence, approached the United Way to get something unified together and raise funds for the effort. So they were really the funders that anchored this piece. And then they brought some of their grantees together. They brought their partners from the city of Detroit, and we jumped in as well. Next slide, please. So what does our campaign do? So for the first bit, we do public events. So we have been organizing and attending public events throughout the city over the past couple of months. The mayor of Detroit did a town hall presentation for an hour where he went through step by step what families can expect as it relates to the child tax credit and how to apply for it. He also did a press conference to really raise awareness about this issue a few months ago. And we've also been going to various community meetings to present on what this credit is and get the word out to folks. The second piece of our campaign, similar to what's going on in Philadelphia, is that we've been funding and training community-based organizations to reach out to individual families. So each organization gets around 10 to 15K over the next several months, and they're able to design their own campaigns that make sense for their neighborhoods, all with the goal to talk to individual families about the child tax credit. So these funded organizations have been door knocking, they're texting and phone banking, they're hosting in-person events and virtual events, all sorts of creative things to get the word out to families. And to support that work, the coalition has developed a canvassing script, frequently asked questions, and then a data collection tool so that we can understand as a campaign how many families each organization has reached at the end of all of this. So that similar to what's happening in Philadelphia, we can do it all again next year, because this is really a two-component campaign in terms of community outreach, right? Families need to do something now, but they also need to do something next year. So we're hoping to replicate what we're doing with our campaign activities this fall, again in 2022. Next slide, please. So the third piece, we've been collaborating with what we're calling our mass outreach partners. So they're not getting funding from us, but these are folks that have a huge reach in the community and already are reaching out to families on a regular basis. So the school district, for example, we've been doing some tabling at their back to school events. We're getting flyers and backpacks that are going out to families. And we're training their canvassers who are going out to families to talk about enrollment. They can also talk about the child tax credit. The same strategy is applying with our workforce development organization in the city, our Head Starts, really trying to find those organizations that are already focused on reaching families and making sure that they have training, flyers, and a point of contact to ask frequently asked questions so that they can really be the ambassadors of this information to the communities and the clients that they're already working with. Next slide, please. Fourth, we've developed some amazing communication tools. Our friends at the United Way and the City of Detroit have taken the lead on that. We have a website and a flyer, which I'll show you a little bit later. We're doing some ads in bus shelters, some billboards. We also have in Detroit a system of kiosks where residents can pay their property taxes and pay for other city fees. And so we're having ads on those kiosks so that when folks come to learn about, how to pay their property taxes, they can also learn about how to put money in their pockets via the child tax credit. And then lastly, we at U of M are working with a group of students to staff a text bot. So families can text in their questions about the child tax credit to an automated service and get some automated answers. But then if they have a question that the bot can't answer, the information will go to students who will then in real time pretty much answer families' questions. There are quite a lot of FAQs about this program and things are changing pretty frequently. So we thought it'd be a good idea to have, some resource for families to be able to ask questions in real time. So that's the communications bit. And then in terms of data, again, like I said, we've been sending out tools to the organizations that we're funding and encouraging them to collect data on how many families they're reaching, how they're doing it, questions on, how many families have already filed, because as we know, there are lots of families who have already filed and are already getting their child tax credit. So it's helpful for us to have that information to really quantify in Detroit how many families really need this outreach, how many families have already been reached by these messages, so that next year we can target our efforts a little bit more strategically. We also have been using some census data to map out where households in poverty with small children live and sharing those maps with our organizations that are doing canvassing so that they can focus their efforts on a particular census tract where we know lots of children in poverty are living and add that into their outreach campaigns. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a map of all of the various roles in our campaign. We started in about May, so we're up and running now. At the top is funding, a critical piece of it. Our Anchor Foundations raised $750,000 for the campaign, so that's what we're working with there. Then we have our tax prep providers who have been specifically funded to continue offering free tax prep services to families through November. They have open appointments so that if you talk to a family, they're interested in the tax credit, they want to know how to file. The message to our canvassers and to our organizations is to help them set up tax prep appointments. That's really the key message that we're sharing in terms of a call to action. So it's important to make sure our tax prep providers are funded to do that work, and they have been. We also are doing training in public speaking. So as I said, we're going to various events, we're training organizations, we're training various workers at organizations who are already coming into contact with residents on what to say and how to deliver these messages most effectively. We've got our communications, and then of course we've got our resident engagement, right? We have the organizations that are really having conversations with families and are making sure that they're well informed of what this is and how to achieve this benefit. And lastly, there's the data bit. So the yellow dollar signs indicate organizations that are funded to do the work. And then the funders, the communications, and then the project managers are all doing this in kind. So I think a really critical role of this is to have a project manager or two who can coordinate all of the campaign partners, make sure we're all using the same messages, make sure that, we heard about the latest update from the IRS. So that piece of it is really important. And in this particular coalition, sometimes one organization will play various roles. So we at Poverty Solutions are doing the data work. We're also doing the training work. We have a funder who's paying for the work, but they're also a project manager. So I think another key to this is working with organizations that are willing to play multiple roles and wear multiple hats to get this campaign off the ground. All right, next slide, please. So in terms of logistics, we meet weekly. As I said, our funding right now is at $750,000. It's important that we're collecting data in a central place. We also have one website and one flyer. So you see all the logos there at the bottom. Those are all of the organizations that are involved, but we decided early on not to each of us have our own website, our own flyer going out, but really to unify all of the communications and the materials in one place so that we can, really get our best bang for our buck with all of our outreach efforts. So there's our Spanish flyer there. And the flyer and the website are run by the United Way of Southeast Michigan. And they're able to update that as there's new information coming out from the IRS. Next slide, please. Also on the back of the flyer, we decided to add additional resources. Since we're spending all of this time and effort getting the information and these flyers out to families, we thought, well, let's put some of the most common social service resources that we think families might need in the city. So we've listed all of that out too, in case folks are interested in, once they've got their CTC, or they're thinking, okay, well, I might have some extra money now for an after-school program. Where do I find that information? So we have that on the back of the flyer for families to be able to access. Next slide, please. So our key messages for the campaign that we've been circulating are, the child tax credit can put money in your pocket each month this year. In Detroit, it's been really important to emphasize that you qualify even if you don't have income or you have very low income. We have a large number of families who usually aren't filing their taxes because their incomes are below the federal income filing requirement. It's about 10,000 families. So we know it's important to share that message that there's no income requirement here. There's no work requirement. And so, it's something that should be on your radar, even if it hasn't been in the past. And then our last message, of course, is the only way to get your payments is to file your taxes. And then we direct people to our website. I should say that we have made a choice to encourage that folks file their full taxes. We talk about the portal, it's not something that we're hiding, but because Michigan has a number of tax credits that families can access in addition to the child tax credit, we've decided to promote opportunities and encourage families to fill out their full tax return so they're not leaving other money on the table like the earned income tax credit and the other special tax credits that Michigan has. Next slide, please. So here's our website, getthetextfacts.org. We've got a graphic here that kind of sums up our main message. We have a number of key facts about the CTC that we try to break down in pretty simple terms. And it's easily navigable on cell phones, and we're working on translating it as well. Next slide, please. And so once you get to the website, you're seeing you can't get your payments if you don't file your taxes. File now, it's not too late, making that super clear. And then we have 3 sections where you can go to by your filing status. So if you've already filed, it lets you know how to check the status of your payments with the IRS, and it kind of goes through some FAQs there. We realize that even though there are lots of folks who've already filed and may not need to do anything else, they still have a lot of questions because this is a new tax credit and they may not be aware of how to change their information, how to make sure the payment is coming to them, et cetera. So we wanted to put that information on there. We also have the information on, if you haven't filed yet, directing people to the United Way's free self-help filing tool. And then last, if you need help filing, it directs you to the 2 tax prep providers that we are working with in the city. One offers in-person appointments and one offers no contact appointments as well. So both of those agencies are ready to go, and we make it as clear as possible how to find them. All right, and then the last slide here. We also have lots of FAQs on our website, kind of breaking down information that the IRS has shared. I'm sure you all have seen the IRS's website that has a lot of comprehensive information. And so we, decided to take some of that, simplify it just a little bit, and include it on this website so families can navigate the frequently asked questions that they might have. So that's the last piece of my presentation here. Oh yeah, the last bit on our website is, again, another plug. If you want additional resources besides the tax credit, a button to encourage you to visit the United Way's 211 helpline or other social service resources that are there. And so that's all I'll share about the coalition, and I'm happy to answer questions along with my colleagues later in the presentation today.
Thank you so much, Afton. Appreciate the comprehensive presentation. So last, to wrap up the presenters. We will have Pablo Blank, who will talk about working with immigrants and their families. So Pablo joined CASA in 2013 as CASA's Director of Immigrant Integration. Pablo leads the tax program. CASA runs 4 VITA sites, preparing over 2,000 tax returns every year in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. CASA partners with the IRS and local coalitions on raising CTC and EITC awareness. This year, CASA led the victory to pass the Maryland EITC for Nonfilers. Yay! Recently, Pablo has been involved in supporting CASA members to sue the Trump administration for not issuing stimulus checks to minors who are US citizens due to the immigration status of their parents. Additionally, Pablo runs the citizenship program, which has helped over 6,000 legal permanent residents to become US citizens in Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania in the past 8 years. Pablo also leads CASA programs on financial education and access to driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants in Maryland. I've noticed some questions in the chat about undocumented folks and getting these payments. So hopefully Pablo can also answer some of those questions. So take it away, Pablo, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And yes, I hope that I will be answering those questions. I will try to do it briefly, the presentation, because we may be running out of time, and usually the Q&A sections are very important. So if you can go to the next slide. CASA is the largest immigrant rights organization in the Mid-Atlantic region. We are present now in Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. We have over 120,000 members now in 43 states. And thank you. And we combine, the CASA model combines services and organizing and political action. And we have a C4 organization called CASA in Action that does all the political work. On the service side, we do CTC. We cover almost every service that immigrants may need to become integrated to the society. So we do citizenship preparation, ESOL classes, workforce development, day labor centers, legal services in immigration, housing, and employment, health navigation, and we have been very, very active during the pandemic with vaccination and education and many other responses. We sat on the tax side, on the CTC side. We ran 4 VITA sites, volunteer income tax assistance, in York, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, Maryland, Langley Park and Rockville in 2 counties in Maryland, and Woodbridge in Virginia. We serve over 2,000 taxpayers every year. 500 of them are new or renew ITIN applications, serving undocumented immigrants. And we offer certified acceptance agents services that I will share later what is this. And as Jenna mentioned at the beginning, CASA members filed a lawsuit against the previous administration because the first stimulus payment left out of those economic stimulus checks all the taxpayers who had an ITIN. So that, for example, is, if you go to the next slide, that, for example, is one of the awareness issues. And go to the next slide, please. That is one of the awareness issues, because many people don't know that this benefit is there for them. And this is a big challenge that we have, because usually low-income families, probably they don't pay attention to the media, and they don't receive good information about this. So they are missing this part. But also many immigrants don't know that they are eligible and they qualify for this benefit, because they think that having an ITIN, and because what the previous administration was doing, leaving them out of the benefit, they think that they are still not eligible. So there is a big work to do in order to reach out to immigrant communities and letting them know that if their kids has a social security number, most probably they will receive the benefit, even if they have if they are filing taxes with an ITIN. If you go to the next slide, please. On the accessibility side, we see many barriers. Many of them were already shared today. Many don't know how to file taxes. Many people don't know where to get free tax preparation because Vita sites are very limited services today. There are only 18, the IRS is spending only $18 million to support Vita sites in the full country, in all the country. That is a very, very low budget to help low-income families to prepare taxes for free. So many families need to pay for taxes. For tax preparation, they will have to pay between $100, $300, even more sometimes, depending who will prepare the tax. And then families need to decide if they will use that $100 to buy food or to prepare their taxes. So this is also something, that affordability of tax preparation is also a relevant barrier. Many don't, if they don't need to file taxes, they don't know how to use the Nonfiler portal that is very complicated to use and is also only in English. So the language barrier is also important. So we also need to do a lot of navigation and translation with when people come to us. We have to translate the form, we have to translate all the communication. We have services in Spanish and French as well. So we have bilingual staff who can handle that. Because in addition to Latinos, we are serving a big community coming from West Africa who speak French. So we also have to turn down the language barrier and how difficult it is to use the Nonfiler portal. Also, many ITIN filers have problems to find the documents to file the ITIN, because when you want to get your ITIN, if you have kids who don't have a social security number, you also need to get the ITIN number for your kids. And to do that, you need to prove the residency of the kids with you. And for that, you need a school certificate or a doctor certificate that shows that the kid is living with you. That many times create a lot of barriers because schools are not prepared to provide these certificates. Many times they forget to include the seal, or they include to sign, or they forgot to include the address or things like that. So when taxpayers file for the ITIN, sometimes the IRS will return the application without issuing the ITIN because a mistake by the school or by the doctor in providing that document. Also, the IRS backlog on processing ITIN application is a huge barrier because there are probably thousands and thousands of people who have filed taxes before the deadline, May 17, before May 17, and they have filed with an ITIN application or renewing their ITIN. And because the IRS is spending probably 4 to 6 months to process those applications, they will not get the advance payments, even though they have already fulfilled their obligation to file taxes on time. They will not get the advance payments because of the backlog on the IRS processing the ITIN applications. And finally, on the language barrier, we can say that it took over 150 years for the IRS to finally translate the 1040 form, the main form that they use, into Spanish. That this was the first years that they have done that. So there are so many other documents like the portal, the Nonfiler portal, so many other documents that are very important and should be in Spanish, and the IRS is very low in doing that. If you move to the other slide, please. What we have done during these last 2 months, we have partnered with the IRS to reopen our Vita sites. We closed our Vita sites after tax season, but we have reopened the sites. So we have been helping individuals again. And we have done 4 events with the IRS where we have the pleasure to have IRS staff coming to volunteer to our Vita sites. And that was very powerful because the families who were coming here they feel very emotional about knowing that IRS staff was here to help them in person, and was a very emotional moment for them to realize that they are welcome. The messaging of welcoming of the IRS staff volunteering in person in our sites were great. And the sites were, the events were also visited by staff of the Taxpayers Advocate Services, by the Department of Treasury, who talk about tax fraud prevention, and the Comptroller of Maryland also and his staff were here congratulating the volunteers. And we were recognized by the IRS Commissioner in the spec ceremony for joining these events with them. If you can move to the next step. These events were also very important because help us to get attention by the media. So we were able to run different stories in NPR, Univision, Telemundo, to explain the CTC. So we, in addition to serve the families who came to our Vita sites for doing the applications, we were also able to reach out many families through TV for free to explain how to get the benefit, and also importantly, how to prevent fraud, right? So many families may be receiving right now phone calls saying we can help you to get we are the IRS, we can help you to get the money. So it's very important also to prevent fraud, because families don't know that the IRS don't call you by phone. And we are also tracking the IRS practices around the ITINs, because not only the backlog that they have to process the ITINs, we also knew that for a glitch in the system, they left out of the July payment 1.2 million families who filed taxes with ITINs. They said that it was a glitch in the system, but fortunately they were able to solve that. And then the families who left out in July will receive those payments starting August 15. And what they will do, they will split the 50% of the benefits. Instead of 6 installments, they will split the money in 5 installments. So the IRS is ready to issue payments now to 1.2 more million families about this. This was a problem with taxpayers who were eligible for CTC and filed taxes with an ITIN number. If you go to the next slide. So before finishing, I would like to address some myths around the ITINs, because even in the Vita community, the free tax preparation community, there are many feelings, bad feelings about helping people with ITINs, right? So some people think, oh, this is too complicated to file. Others say, oh, we don't speak Spanish, or we don't speak French, or we don't speak any other languages, or we are not certified ACTon agents. So I would like to mention that ITIN applications are not more difficult than a regular 1040 form with the social security number. It may take probably 15-20 more minutes to complete the W7 form. That is only 1 page and with very basic demographic information of the taxpayer, and helping the taxpayer to know what documentation they should include in the envelope. Because when you file for an ITIN, you have to send your original passport, your original picture ID, original document from the school and doctors, etc. So you just need to spend probably 15-20 more minutes to complete this form, and helping the taxpayer to understand what is the document that they should attach. And the certified ACTon agent is a kind of, for people who are not familiar with this, a kind of notary authorized by the IRS to certify the copies of the passport and all the other documents. It's a very, very formal process that the IRS runs for training and certifying organizations who can do this service. And it's very important. So if you have a Vita site, try to contact your spec representative and try to get the certified ACTon agent for your site as well. So those are, and finally, I would like to mention also that one thing that is being missed is that there is a big group of kids who are being left out of these CTC payments and are the kids with ITIN, or the kids who don't have a social security number. So we have millions of kids in the US, and we have sad situation in the families where a family may have 4 kids, 2 born abroad with ITINs and 2 born here in the US with social security numbers. And those families will have conversations, oh, we are eating today thanks to the advance payment that we get for these 2 kids and not these 2 other kids. So it's very, very unfair that kids with no social security number are being left out of this benefit, because they are also living in poverty. And if this is a tool to to remove kids from poverty, they should also be receiving these benefits. So thank you so much, and I will be happy to answer any questions during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Pablo, and thank you everyone else. For those who are interested in supporting immigrants with outreach and doing outreach to immigrants, we are doing another webinar, and I'll leave the information in the chat in a few minutes. But that's going to specifically address like how to do immigrant outreach around the child tax credit. Christine, if you can move to the next slide. So in these next few minutes, I'll just quickly cover some of the resources that we have available to help you in your outreach before turning it back to the presenters for a few questions before we wrap. So wanted to start on this page. So all of our outreach materials can be accessed on this one page, taxoutreach.org/coronavirus. So if you don't remember any other link, remember this one. And this page will have just a quick overview of CTC Outreach, some quick facts, and then we'll go into the various materials that we offer. On the next slide, you will see the 3 main buckets of materials that we have. So we just put out an outreach toolkit, which we are super excited about. This toolkit has messaging that we have tested through digital ads, earned media materials, including a pitch and press release and all of that good stuff. We also have a social media toolkit, call and text scripts and newsletter copy, as well as a flyer and postcard. And a couple of these materials I will show examples of in a little bit. In addition to those more traditional outreach materials with a lot of language that you can use. So just first of all, with any of these materials, feel free to use them really in any way that you see fit. You can take anything, change it, edit it, and you don't have to put our name on anything. In addition to those materials, we do also have resources for folks who are helping people with the CTC directly, either through answering questions or filing taxes or going through the non-filer form or the CTC portal. And so we have instructions for getting through those 2 portals, as well as a webinar that we did a couple weeks ago that goes through those portals step by step. And then finally, we have been collecting resources for immigrant outreach as well. So on that page, you'll find links to different materials that are in different languages. On the next slide, you will see a couple examples of the kinds of social media graphics that we have. So we have graphics for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and as well as even so if you wanted to post something on your Instagram stories, we have an infographic for that as well. On the next slide, you'll see the flyer that we produce. We also have this in a postcard size, so you can mail it out pretty easily. And this flyer and the postcard, we don't have it up yet, but we are working on translations for those materials. So look out for that soon. And as soon as those are ready, we will post it on the site and update that for you all. And then on the next slide, you will see, so we are sending everything out to you if you've signed up for this webinar. So you will get all of these links, but in addition to the materials that I just talked about, we have some informational pages, including FAQs and how to get started with outreach. So just wanted to put all those resources on one page for you all. And then on the next slide, I know that we did receive some questions about where to refer people for help. So of course, the best thing, and we do encourage, is to find a local organization to refer folks to, right? So somewhere where they either do in person or on the phone support is really the best option. However, there are luckily some national resources if there are no local folks to direct people to. So one of our favorites, getctc.org, is from our friends at Code for America. This website explains the credit, eligibility, and how to get it. It also does direct people to the IRS non-filer form, as well as virtual tax filing services and the CTC update portal. 211 is another service that you can direct folks to. So 211 is a hotline service from the United Way that connects people to local resources for support. Many of the local 211s can answer basic questions about the CTC, and as well as direct callers to any VITA services nearby. Childtaxcredit.com is another option. So this website we love for their CTC eligibility calculator that really helps people understand how much they can get from the credit. And then finally, we have letsgetset.co. So this website is another website with tools and resources. We're particularly excited about the texting option that they have. So if someone texts CTC to the number listed on the slide, they will get key updates on the CTC, such as like when the portal will be updated and all of that good stuff. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll just see, keep in contact with us. If you have any questions after this webinar, feel free to shoot us an email and we will get back to you. And then, gosh, we had so much great information today that we are running a little bit short on time, but I think we do have a few minutes for questions. Roxy, did you have particular questions you wanted to ask the panelists, or do you want me to just call some of those out?
You can call them out. Great.
Okay. So I was tracking some of the questions in the chat and had a few for our panelists. So one question I saw was for Delma. So what are some examples of alternative identification that banks might accept for individuals wanting to open a checking account for receiving the CTC payments?
That's a really good question. And so I did mention that some financial institutions will accept the ITIN, right? But it is real specific to institution. I think this is one of the things that was really interesting as I created this chart to put up on the website, is seeing such a variety, right? What I did see consistent with all of our financial institutions, at least here in Albuquerque, that are offering these accounts, is accepting the consular identification card, the matricular consular from Mexico, but also like the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Guatemala, I've seen in a variety, not all of them, but some, right? Employment authorization documents, some will accept, some don't. Tribal IDs, that's a big one for us here in New Mexico. Some would accept, some of them would not accept as a primary, but as a secondary ID. School IDs, we're working with a lot of organizations that work with foster youth. This is a consideration, right? They may not have a guardian. So will they accept a school ID as a primary? Yes. And we had several financial institutions that would also waive the monthly fees if they were under 21 years old. So that's another good one. Some other alternative ID is a permanent resident card. Most of us know that as a green card. Some will accept military citizenship, Canadian citizenship certificates, passports. I think the most unusual one that I saw was a concealed license at one of the financial institutions would accept that as alternative ID. So it's worth exploring with the financial institutions for sure.
Thank you, Delma. So another question that we received was around what support is available. So wondering, I think this is especially for ACTon, what are there VITA sites available outside the tax season, which right now is outside of the tax season? And then the second part of this question, I think, is around how do you support folks who have more complicated issues outside of just like a simple tax return, right? So maybe people who are having trouble getting the CTC, what do you do to help troubleshoot?
And
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Pablo.
no,
Well, I was going to say really quickly, so the tax prep providers in our campaign that are funded are also VIDA providers. So they've extended their services throughout the end of the year. And they also are able to answer questions when residents call in to make appointments. So they're kind of providing that, answering tricky questions role in our coalition. But let's hear Pablo and his perspective as an actual VIDA provider.
Thank you, ACTon. I agree. So we usually close our season after, or we are open usually only during tax season because of funding. But we open this year because this is very important for the community. So fortunately, we have very engaged volunteers who can help us. And the volunteers who are trained in taxes are also very good to learn very fast all the nuances of CTC eligibility and the non-filer portal. So we are lucky, but I don't know if this effort is sustainable, right? So I believe that we really need more funding from the federal government, from other local governments and foundations to support families, because the 5 million, I believe there is a number, something like 5 million taxpayers who are eligible for CTC are not receiving the benefit. That is a number coming from the IRS at some point. And those are the hard people to find, right? So it's very difficult to talk to them. I think that what one of my colleagues were talking about, combining vaccination with COVID vaccination with CTC is a very good strategy, because the most effective way to find these 5 million people is in the streets. So it's house by house, or trying for them to come to you for other things different than CTC, because for CTC, they don't trust organizations. Probably they don't think that they are eligible. So it's very difficult to reach out them. So partnering with other services may be a good strategy.
Thank you so much for that, Pablo. And we did get a few questions about folks who are undocumented or maybe don't have an SSN and the child tax credit. So I just want to clarify that how it works is as long as the child has a social security number, the parent or guardian claiming the child does not need to have a social security number. They can have a social security number or an ITIN. And then the other question was, if you're undocumented, how do you get the child tax credit? So for anyone to get the CTC, you just need the IRS to have your information already. And so you can do that either through filing a full tax return or using the IRS non-filer form. For the IRS non-filer form, you need to already have an ITIN. Whereas for filing taxes, you can submit, as Pablo said, you can submit the ITIN application at the same time as you're filing a full tax return. So those are kind of the steps for that. And then finally, we have one question that I know has come up a lot around custody. So the question that I'm trying to find it now. So this person says they work with domestic violence victims and see instances of financial abuse and the abuser taking victims' stimulus checks. Is there anything that can be done if people file joint taxes? I know this is a bit of a tricky question, so if anyone can answer this one before we wrap up for today.
I don't understand the question, sorry.
So basically what to do if you're in an abusive relationship or someone's in an abusive relationship and the wrong person has gotten the child tax credit.
So if you have filed in 2020, married jointly, but now during this year you have this situation, and you would like to get the funding without your partner. Because if you cannot file taxes, you can file as a head of household, or you have alternatives, right? So to file taxes without including your abusive spouse. So the issue would be, I think that there are also clinics. Usually if you Google online, the IRS also sponsors some tax clinics, usually in partnership with universities, that may be good resources for answering these very particular questions about that, because it may change taxpayer through taxpayer, depending the situation of the family and when they file taxes, etc.
Thank you so much. And we also have some answers in the chat, which is awesome. Great. So, well, we are already at 3:31, so we're a minute past time. If there are any other questions that folks have, feel free to shoot any of the presenters or the Get It Back campaign in email. And we are so grateful for all of y'all for attending today. Thanks so much to all of the presenters for sharing your awesome local outreach examples. And I hope this has been inspiring everyone here today to do some work in your communities around the child tax credit, around this super important payment. As a reminder, before we wrap up, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out the slides and the recording within 1 week. So just look out for that in your email. All right, all, thank you so much. Thank you all to the presenters again, and take care.